All right. I read that you fell in love with the idea of space and space exploration when you were 5,
Mm.
watching Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. So let me ask you to look back at the historical context and impact of that. So the space race from 1957 to 1969 between the Soviet Union and the U.S. was in many ways epic. It was a rapid sequence of dramatic events. First satellite to space, first human to space, first spacewalk, first uncrewed landing on the moon, then some failures, explosions, deaths on both sides, actually, and then the first human walking on the moon. What are some of the more inspiring moments or insights you take away from that time, those few years, that just 12 years?
Well, I mean, there's so much inspiring there. One of the great things to take away from that, one of the great von Braun quotes is, "I have, I have come to use the word impossible with great caution."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that's kind of the big story of Apollo is that things, going to the moon was literally an analogy that people used for something that's impossible. Oh yeah, you'll do that when men walk on the moon,
Yeah.
and of course it finally happened. So I think it was pulled forward in time because of the space race. I think with the geopolitical implications and how much resource was put into it. At the peak, that program was spending 2 or 3% of GDP on the Apollo program. So much resource that I think it was pulled forward in time. We kind of did it ahead of when we quote unquote should have done it.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's also a technical marvel. I mean, it's truly incredible. It's it's the 20th century version of building the pyramids or something. It's an achievement that because it was pulled forward in time, and because it did something that had previously been thought impossible, it rightly deserves its place as in the pantheon of great human achievements.
And of course, you named the projects, the rockets that Blue Origin is working on after some of the folks involved.
Yeah,
I don't understand why I didn't say New Gagarin. Is that is
there's an
that?
American bias in
Oh,
the naming. I
okay. This is
apologize,
very strange.
Lex.
Just asking for a friend.
I'm
Clarify.
a big fan of Gagarin's, though, and in fact, I think his first words in space, I think are incredible. He purportedly said, "My God, it's blue," and that really drives home. No one had seen the Earth from space. No one knew that we were on this blue planet.
Yeah.
No one knew what it looked like from out there, and Gagarin was the first person to see it.
One of the things I think about is how dangerous those early days were for Gagarin, for Glenn, for everybody involved. Like how big of a risk they were all
They were
taking.
taking huge risks. I'm not sure what the Soviets thought about Gagarin's flight, but I think that the Americans thought that the Alan Shepard flight, the flight that New Shepard is named after, the first American in space, he went on his suborbital flight. They thought he had about a 75% chance of success.
Mhm.
So that's a pretty big risk, a 25% risk.
It's kind of interesting that Alan Shepard is not quite as famous as John Glenn. So for people who don't know, Alan Shepard is the first astronaut,
The first
sub-
American in space.
American in suborbital flight,
Correct.
and then the first orbital flight
And
is
then
John
John
Glenn.
Glenn is the first American to orbit the Earth. By the way, I have the most charming, sweet, incredible letter from John Glenn, which I have framed and hang on my office wall,
What did you say?
where he tells me how grateful he is that we have named New Glenn after him. And he sent me that letter about a week before he died. And it's really an incredible. It's also a very funny letter. He's writing, and he says, this is a letter about New Glenn from the original Glenn, and he's got a great sense of humor, and he's very happy about it and grateful. It's very sweet.
Does he say P.S. Don't mess this up, or is that
No, he doesn't.
make me look good?
He doesn't do that.
Okay,
but
all
wait,
right.
but John, wherever you are, we got you
All
covered.
right, good. So back to maybe the big picture of space. When you look up at the stars and think big, what do you hope is the future of humanity, hundreds, thousands of years from now, out in space?
I would love to see, a trillion humans living in the solar system. If we had 1 trillion humans, we would have at any given time 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Einsteins. That would our solar system would be full of life and intelligence and energy. And we can easily support a civilization that large with all of the resources in the solar system.
So what do you think that looks like? Giant space stations?
Yeah, the only way to get to that vision is with giant space stations. The planetary surfaces are just way too small. So you can, I mean, unless you turn them into giant space stations or something, but yeah, we will take materials from the moon and from near Earth objects and from the asteroid belt and so on, and we'll build giant O'Neill style colonies. And people will live in those. And they have a lot of advantages over planetary surfaces. You can spin them to get normal Earth gravity. You can put them where you want them. I think most people are going to want to live near Earth, not necessarily in Earth orbit, but in Earth, but near Earth vicinity orbits, and so that they can move relatively quickly back and forth between their station and Earth. So, I think a lot of people, especially in the early stages, are not going to want to give up Earth altogether.
They go to Earth for vacation.
Yeah. Same way that, you might go to Yellowstone National Park for vacation. People will, and people will get to choose whether they live on Earth or whether they live in space, but they'll be able to use much more energy and much more material resource in space than they would be able to use on Earth.